You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt McGachy, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Kelly Schaefer of Atheist. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers!
Hello there. Thanks for tuning into the show today. I've got another good one for you. I'm really excited to share this episode with you, and I want to thank you right off the bat for downloading this episode. Quite literally get paid by the download these days, so any little bit you can do helps. You can download those back episodes, save them for later, whatever. It's going to help me. It's going to help keep this show going, and I really, really appreciate it. I'll keep this short and sweet, but I just wanted to remind you about the Facebook group. If you're bored sitting around at home right now, or if you're bored sitting around wherever you are right now, and you got a device that can access the interwebs, and you have Facebook, we have a Facebook group for people who like this show. It's The Tone Mob on Facebook. You can check it out, and there's a bunch of really awesome people in there. We're talking about gear, we're talking about food, we're talking about nonsense, just like we do on this podcast, and we're doing it every day there in the group. So if you haven't joined, come hang out with us. There's a few thousand really cool people in there just chilling and having a great time. So yeah, check that out. And without further ado, let's get into this week's podcast. Why not? Check out this one with Barry Grzebik. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar tone and the people behind it. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have Barry Grzebik from Grez Guitars. How's it going, man?
Hey, Blake. Very well, thanks.
We finally made it happen.
It's been like 9 months in the planning, it seems.
Yes. Well, we were originally going to do it in person, but, something happened, and now we're not supposed to see people. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. I was looking forward to a little long weekend up in Portland and dropping into the shred shed and hanging out, but it just wasn't in the cards.
No, but that's okay. We'll do it one of these days. It'll happen.
Yeah.
We'll get through it. But yeah. So for everyone who's listening, if you've been following along on the social media or in the Facebook group, which I guess is also social media, but Instagram is what I meant by that primarily, you'll have seen me ranting and raving in a good way about Barry's guitars at one point or another. He was kind enough to send one up as a loaner before we did this podcast, and I'm just absolutely in love with it. But before we get into the details on all that, I kind of want to know about you. What's your story? Where did you come from, and how did you start making such rad instruments?
Thanks. I started guitar building about 10 years ago, so sort of new to all of this, considering there's people who have been doing it for 40 years plus. Before that, I had a fairly complete career in the audio industry. I was and still am an acoustician and product designer. So I've made my living designing speakers, designing analog audio equipment, as a sound designer, designing sound systems and the acoustics for churches and performing arts centers and stuff like that. So I spent a lot of years in audio and as a product designer and as a guitar player. And, things change and you need to make a new plan. And, one day I sort of thought, I should probably try to build a guitar. I kind of know a lot about product design and acoustics and sound and guitars. And if you put all this together, that's kind of a nice mix of skills. So I designed a guitar, built it. It kind of came out okay. So I built another one. And here we are. I guess that's the super short version.
Yeah, but I'd like to get into the nitty gritty details because there's a lot of people who build guitars that don't have a background in acoustics, and I've gotten fortunate enough to meet a few people through doing the podcast that have that skill set and that knowledge base, and they come at guitars from a very different perspective than most people I know. Us plebes are just kind of like, oh, it feels right, or it sounds like woody or whatever, but you actually know the math behind this stuff. So,
to some extent, yes. I think designing products is a little bit of an art. It's not just math and science to make a product that's successful, whether it's a studio monitor or a guitar or whatever you're designing, a widget. You just have to have the technical knowledge and the skills, I guess, but you also have to understand the user and what it's intended to, or how it's intended to be used. And like in the case of a guitar, if you're not a guitar player, how do you know if that neck feels right?
Right.
Not that there even is a right, because there's so many preferences, but sort of, it's exactly the same in acoustics, believe it or not, in that it's part art and part science. If you look sort of historically at concert halls and how they've been designed and built over hundreds of years and over even just the last 75 years, as people have in theory gotten smarter in the last 75 years, they've built worse and worse concert halls. Because you get the math people just doing calculations and saying, this should work, this should be great. And then you end up making rooms that sound bad. Because it isn't just science and math. You have to have some empirical knowledge and experience, and so guitars are the same, I think.
That's interesting. It does make sense that it would be a combination. I'm really interested in I don't know that much about it, but I'm interested in some of the science behind rooms, because the one I'm sitting in right now is kind of a weird room in that things do sound really good out here. I mess with things in the box a little bit, but I really, as long as my mic placement's okay, I really don't have to do a lot of post work when I do demos and things. It's pretty much as raw as it gets. In fact, like when I did the Chase Bliss Dark World demo that I did here, almost, I don't know, a year and a half ago, whenever that thing came out, we just took a Zoom mic in the mid-side position and just stuck it in front of the speaker. And we didn't really think it was going to sound all that good. But when we played it back, it was like, it sounds fine. We cut a little bass out, and I think that has a lot to do with the room. When I gave my dimensions to a friend of mine that is a little more into this stuff, he was like, well, who gave you these dimensions? I was like, my yard. It's just what fit there. and he's like, well, this has really good ratios. And so I was like, I don't even really know what that means. It just sounds good out here.
Yeah. And so, some of that is luck. There are a lot of really, really famous and successful recording studios that were just some room that people moved into and started recording, right? So you can just be lucky, but you can also be unlucky. You can have a room that's horrible. It's got all the wrong things going on, the wrong dimensions, the wrong angles. And the other thing is, I suspect you're close miking, right? That mic is right up on the grill cloth, more or less.
Most of the time, most of the time I'm close miking, but I usually have a room mic mixed in there as well. Most of the time. I didn't on that video. It's just it was capturing, but it was still capturing some of the room because of the mid-side nature of that mic. Yeah, you can get away with a lot though when you're close miking, because you can almost think of it as signal to noise, right? If you have a cardioid mic and it's right up in the face of the amp, it's receiving a lot of information from the amp, and being cardioid or hypercardioid, maybe it's getting less information from the room. So if how good your room is still matters, but it matters to a lesser extent than if it was, let's say, an Omni mic you stuck in front of the guitar cabinet, where it's listening to the cabinet just as much as it is the room. Gotcha. Well, here's I promise we're going to get into guitar stuff, but I have had a lot of people ask me about my room, my shed. It's like, oh, how did you build it? And I did what I could afford to do. It's not entirely soundproof. It's but it's as much as I could. I did the whole room within a room thing, but I couldn't afford MLV on the whole, everything, and all that stuff. There is some in it, but not that much. But like, do you have any like just general advice for when somebody is thinking about building a studio or even just a nicer practice space like this? Like, do you have any just kind of high level tips?
Yeah, a couple of like random things that come up all the time. I think the first is that there's interior acoustics, what your room sounds like when you're in the room, right? The character and the nature of the reverb. And then there's sound isolation, which is how much sound is getting out or coming in through the structure. And they are fairly independent of each other. And a lot of times people forget that and they think that, well, I put up some sound absorbing panels on the wall that should keep the sound in. And that doesn't do much for keeping the sound in. That's really about manipulating the interior acoustics. So if we're talking about sound isolation, probably the two biggest points are making sure it's airtight and making sure everything is as massive as possible, which is why you'll see people putting up 2 layers of drywall instead of 1 or 3 layers of drywall.
Yeah, I did too. I did too. Yeah.
So making sure everything's, and when I say airtight, I mean you're going to get acoustical caulk, which is a non-hardening caulk, so it won't shrink and harden and then open up the gaps over time. And you're going to caulk the daylights out of everything. For example, if you have an outlet, an electrical outlet in the wall, you just cut a huge hole in your 3 layers of drywall, which are supposed to keep the sound in. So if you just pop that outlet in, you've got a sound leak.
Yeah.
Think about like filling your studio with water, and where's all the water going to ooze out? Fill up all those spots with this acoustical caulk. So making it really sealed up and airtight helps a lot in terms of sound escaping. And then, simple things like minimizing windows and doors. Windows and doors are always your leakiest points. And then your floors and your ceiling are sometimes tough. It's really easy to go and put 3 or 4 layers of drywall on the wall. It's harder to build up the floor. Maybe you're on a slab and that works reasonably well, but so airtight and lots of mass. And you said, MLV, mass loaded vinyl, that stuff helps. That's sort of like the icing on the cake. If you can get that in there, that's great. The more tricks you can pull out, the better the final result will be. And the other thing that is really important is the thickness of the walls, believe it or not. So that the frequencies that get through a wall are in part proportional to the thickness of that wall cavity. Right. So if you build a 2x4 wall or a 2x6 wall or a 2x8 wall, the bigger that airspace in there, the better it'll block low frequencies from getting out.
Right.
Which is maybe less important if you're a guitar player or more important if you're a bass player or a drummer. So really thick walls reject or contain bass frequencies much better than just little 2x4 walls.
Right. And that's a lot of that's the main struggle with isolation, right? Is the bass frequencies. It's kind of easy to trap the higher stuff, but
that's
you
right.
get booming bass.
It's harder and harder to stop bass. Like when you go to a movie theater, for example, right? You can have, a Bond film in theater 1 with explosions and a love story in theater 2 right next to it, and you need to not hear those explosions in the other theater. So there, you're talking about using like a block wall, cinder block wall, or even a concrete tilt-up wall, plus a big air gap, plus 4 layers of drywall on each side of that wall, so that it'll have enough mass and enough airspace to get those really low frequencies to be isolated well. Stuff you can't do at home, but you just keep adding it on, right? Make that wall massive. More mass, more airspace, right? Larger dimensions, and you get there eventually.
So I was just doing this all via Google. I had a little bit of insight from a friend who built a really nice studio here locally, but he obviously had a bigger budget to work with than I did. But one thing that I was getting really confused on was the concept of I'm reaching back like several years in my knowledge bank, and I haven't used any of this in years. The concept of the third leaf being a problem. And it seemed like that was a bit of a debate between some people, whether it was a problem or not. Because I was trying to figure out, because I did like my exterior framing and then my interior framing is completely separate except for at the floor, obviously. Like it doesn't really touch the exterior framing anywhere. and those gaps are caulked and all that. But I was trying to figure out, like I seen some people put drywall, like when they were stacking their drywall, they would do like 2 layers on the inside of the wall and 2 layers on the outside of the wall. And some people said, no, it'd be better just to do 4 layers on the outside. And I was so confused by that. Is that making sense?
Well, yeah. And there's really no point there's no reason to be confused. This isn't something that's actually in debate. It's maybe just some point of confusion on the internet.
Okay.
So, right. Cause you can find lots of information on the internet.
Yes.
So the idea that a third leaf is bad assumes that your wall dimension is constant. So if you have a 2x6 wall, and you break that up into 2 sections instead of 1 big section, it'll perform more poorly. Mm-hmm. And the main reason, and this is kind of a cool concept that I think you can visualize, is so let's say you have sound energy from something in the room, and that sound energy strikes the wall. And the drywall moves diaphragmatically a little bit, right? When the energy hits it, it moves.
Yeah.
You can imagine that, right?
Of course.
And then that then is modulating the pressure inside your wall cavity, right? Because there's air trapped in there in theory.
Like a drum.
Like a drum. And then the air pressure modulation stimulates the surface on the other side of the wall cavity, which is, let's say, the outside of your room or the next room.
Okay.
So that's how that's one of the ways that the sound gets through is the drywall vibrates, modulates the pressure inside the cavity, which then moves the other side of the wall. And that's sound getting through. So the bigger that airspace, you're modulating the pressure less for the same amount of energy striking the drywall, right? So if you have a big, huge cavity and you're moving the drywall the same amount, pressure change is less.
Right.
If the pressure change is less, it can't affect the other side as much, right?
Okay.
Is that making sense?
Yeah, it does.
If you break that up and you put a leaf in the middle, another wall in the middle, now you've got a higher pressure in each side and the sound can go right through.
Oh, okay. That makes so much more sense than what some random guy on a forum was trying to tell me.
And so that's one of the ways that sound gets through the wall is that pressure modulation. The other way is through leakage, which we talked about. You're going to caulk everything, so there won't be any leakage. And then the main third way is through physical vibration, right? So when your drywall vibrates, it also vibrates the stud. And that stud might be connected to the drywall on the other side. So that then gets transferred into the drywall on the other side and that vibrates, which is why you'll see things like resilient channels, which kind of put the drywall on a spring. So when the sound hits the drywall, it decouples it from the stud and can't vibrate the stud. So it can't then pass through to the other side.
Right.
Or that's what the mass-loaded vinyl one of the things the mass-loaded vinyl tries to do is decouple. So the vibrations can't transmit through.
Right.
Physically from one piece of wood to the next piece of wood to the next piece of wood and eventually out the other side.
Right. Breaking that connection.
Breaking the connection. Yeah.
Yeah. That's something that I see people who like set up home theater stuff in their basement. They hang the drywall on isolated hangers, to try to avoid it going up through the floor.
This
is all like hyper nerdy stuff, and I love it. It's great. It's just like I don't get to talk about that all that often in the context of this podcast, so it's kind of fun. One other thing, that I would tell people if they were trying to do something like this is what I did with my electrical is to avoid having to buy these special sealed boxes or lots of acoustic caulk, which I did use cases and cases of caulk on this board.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I got really lucky. I found a huge case of it with one of those what do they call it? Like the Restore, the Habitat Humanity.
Oh yeah.
I was like, I'm just like looking for caulk anywhere I can find it. I was like, oh, there is this massive case of acoustic caulk and it's like $1 a tube. Give it all to me. It was awesome. But one thing is if you can picture the design of the room and have it look good with surface mount electrical, that's going to save you a lot of headaches. That's why I did surface mount electrical in here.
Oh, sure. Don't even pierce the wall.
Yep.
Keep it solid. Yeah.
Yeah. I just, that's a pointer that I've tried to make to lots of people because it's an easy one. It's, if you can make it aesthetically pleasing with surface mount, go for that because it's going to save you a lot of headache. So,
oh yeah, as soon as you put a hole in that wall, you're popping the balloon, right? You made this great tight structure, and then you just start poking holes in it where the sound can leak out.
Exactly. Yeah. And then also I would say the big mistake I made, because I actually didn't start this project with the idea that it was going to be a music room exclusively. So I thought it was just going to be kind of a man cave, where we can hang out with friends and put some couches and stuff. But slowly it kind of came to realize it's going to be a music room exclusively. But so I didn't pour a slab. So my floor is a big weak point for me. It's as good as I could afford to make a wood floor. It's pretty beefy for a wood floor, but it's still a wood floor at the end of the day. So a slab would have been better. So those are my two quick and dirty things. If you can afford a slab, do a slab and surface mount electrical. So anyway,
believe it or not, slabs can be a problem in adjoining spaces because sound will travel through the slab.
Right.
And then pop up in the next room. But in your case, you have a little standalone structure, so a slab would have been kind of nice.
Yeah, and it would have ended up costing me the same amount of money that I spent trying to beef up this wood floor. But it was like already half built by the time I was like, oh, this is going to be a music room. And I was like, what am I going to do about this floor? This isn't going to work.
When you start stomping on the floor and it sounds like you're beting on a drum, you're like, oh, well, that's not stiff enough.
Yeah, it's pretty massive. I mean, I ended up putting a 6x12 beam down the center of it, and there's a couple layers of MLV in the floor in between the
excellent
several layers of floor. So I did as good as I could, but it's still a weak point. It just is. So
there always is, though, right? I mean, no matter how cool your studio is, there's always a budget. You always have to make some kind of decisions about what you are and are not going to do, right?
Yeah,
very rare that I have a client or a project where they're just like, yeah, do everything. It just money's no object.
Yeah, it's I mean, all in all, I'm very happy with it. But if I had to rebuild it, there's a couple things that I would do to make it perfect. I guess perfect for me anyway. But yeah, guitars and stuff. So that was the building a shred shed portion of the podcast. Yeah, so you started building guitars. And how does your knowledge as an acoustician play into that? What considerations or design protocol have you followed that came directly from that world?
Well, I think when I first started building guitars, I started out building acoustic guitars and studying that topic pretty intently. And what I was finding as I was reading about how to build an acoustic guitar and how an acoustic guitar works, all of the principles that the people were talking about in these books were already familiar to me, right? So so I kind of just had this giant head start. As a matter of fact, there were instances where I'm reading these books and I'm thinking, wait, that's not right. But all right, I'll let it go, Because, what you find especially with acoustic guitars is you have people who have learned to build acoustic guitars through a mentorship, apprenticeship sort of program, and they learn how to do it and they get very, very good at it. They don't always really know why what they're doing works. And then they start talking about it. And sometimes you hear things that you just know aren't, well, that's not really how it works, but that's fine. Your guitars are awesome, so that's cool. Anyway, so that was sort of when we start talking about acoustics and resonance and wood thickness. I mean, that's what makes a good acoustic guitar is you want a stiff and light top, and how you adjust the resonance of the top messes or alters the sound of the guitar, and all of this has to do with braces and stiffness and resonance, and it was just all easy, I guess, for me. Not to say I've mastered it, you never really do, but at least from a learning curve standpoint, when I dove into it, I was just sort of like, oh yeah, this all makes sense. I already know about this stuff because I design speakers for a living, and in a lot of ways it's the same. You want a speaker cone to be stiff and light, and just all these properties that are paralleling, I guess, or concepts that parallel.
Mm-hmm. And then you obviously took some of that acoustic building and translated it into the electric world with the Mendocino that's here.
That's right. I kind of realized that although I do dig acoustic guitars, I didn't really know that many acoustic guitar players. And I don't know. I just sort of thought, who am I going to sell guitars to, right? Because when you build one guitar, that's like a great personal accomplishment. But, you're not a brand yet. You're just a guy who's built one guitar. And then you start thinking about, well, hey, how am I going to sell these, right? What am I doing that's unique? And I just sort of felt like there was a hole. I didn't feel like there was a hole in the acoustic guitar market. Like, what am I going to fill? What am I going to do that's super cool and different and unique? And why would somebody buy from me? But I did see what was a hole, or I perceived as a hole, in the electric market, in the sort of semi-hollow body world. And the idea is, if you take like a big hollow archtop guitar, right? An L5 or an ES175 or a big Gretsch, whatever. And so that's your reference point for an archtop. And then maybe on the other side of the spectrum is your solid body, your Les Paul, your Strat, whatever. And then in the middle is your semi-hollow body, which would be like a 335 or something. Except, and in my opinion, a 335-ish guitar is nowhere near the middle. It's way closer to a Les Paul. As a matter of fact, there's lots of recordings where it's hard to say, is that a Les Paul or a 335? If you have them back to back and you go back and forth and you play them, you can obviously tell the difference. But I sort of felt like the semi-hollow bodies that were commercially available were way too solid body-like. They weren't in the middle between an archtop and a solid body. And I wanted to make something that actually was in the middle. More acoustic, basically, right?
Right.
And I think, there's logical reasons that the market did that. You go back into the 60s and, you're looking at giant amps, people playing super reverbs, these giant loud amps on stage, and you needed your guitars to be pretty darn feedback resistant and pretty stiff, which is what leads them to be more Les Paul-like and less 175-like, so that they can hold up on stage feedback-wise. But now with their trends towards smaller amps and lower stage volume, you can actually have a guitar that has a little more resonance and life to it, and it'll still be manageable on stage because you're not playing an 80-watt amp, you're playing a 20-watt amp.
Yeah, that's one of the things that is so unique about this guitar to me is, because of all the reasons we just talked about, I do get to play loud pretty regularly. And it's not the biggest space in the world. So when I'm playing loud, it's, whatever guitar I'm playing will feed back and resonate and all that stuff. What was so surprising to me is how controllable this was for being so, loud and acoustically by, unplugged. Like normally when I have a guitar like that, like a Gretsch or something, it's really difficult to control the feedback. And with this guitar, where I, when I strum it, it's like sounds loud and I can feel the vibration of the top and everything, but I can control it. And I thought that was a lot of fun, especially for me playing my weird sludgy nonsense that I like to play at high volumes. That I don't know what it is about it that makes it. I can just like put my hand on it and settle it down when I want it to, or let it go when I don't want it to, don't want it to ring out like that. But you really nailed it. I think
some of that is like fine tuning how much resonance, right? I sort of feel like in the semi-hollow bodies that existed, the resonance that was chosen for the instrument by the designer for the instrument to have was kind of on the low side. And I just sort of feel like we can let a little more out.
Yeah.
And it's still, especially because we're playing on slightly smaller amps, not quite as crazy loud. So we can let the body go a little more. So it's not like we're saying it's a hollow body, which, may have its own problems, but it's just taking that semi-hollow body and sliding it a little more towards the middle, right? A little more lively, but not going crazy. It's supposed to be a useful instrument for people.
Yeah. Because there's no F holes in this thing, it's weird that that's just become a standard term, even though they're not always F holes, but that's just what it is. How thick is the top on it?
It's very thin. It's like an acoustic guitar top. So it's about 100. It's just over 1/8 of an inch thick. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
130 thousandths roughly. So it's been treated like an acoustic guitar top. So thinned way down, so it's super lively. And then there's actually bracing on the underside, sort of like an acoustic guitar would have, to ensure it has enough structure and to break up the resonance so that you're getting a lot of different frequencies resonating. So it doesn't just honk at one frequency on you.
Can you explain the like some general bracing concepts? Because I really know nothing about it. I know that has a huge effect on an acoustic guitar's tone, but I don't know what makes it do one thing and what style of bracing makes it do another thing. I don't know anything about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can give you some general ideas, and it's hard to have a hard and fast. Well, if you do this, this will happen, because there's so many variables. But generally speaking, if you take a piece of wood, usually a spruce or redwood or cedar or something that you're going to make an acoustic guitar top out of, when you get it, it's a thick board. Mm-hmm. And if you tap on it, it's like kind of like tapping on your desk. It's sort of tight and bright and doesn't really ring the way you want it to. So you start thinning it down until it really starts to vibrate really, really well. And then you put strings on it, and the strings are pulling with something like 170 pounds of force. So this top, which you just thickness down to just the right thickness so it resonates beautifully, then proceeds to get torn off the top of the guitar.
Right.
Because it can't hold up to basically somebody standing on it, right? Mm-hmm. So the bracing is primarily there to resist the tension of the strings. And you'll see that what's called bellying. Sometimes if you look at the bridge of an acoustic guitar, just behind the bridge, you can sort of see some deformation of the top where the bridge is pulled up just a little.
Right.
That's called bellying. And if you're really fine tuning the guitar, you almost would have purposely a little bit of bellying. It's a sign that it's not overbuilt. If the guitar has no bellying, that's a big manufacturer who doesn't want warranty problems. Right, they made their top a little thicker, their braces a little thicker, no bellying happening. Too much bellying, and it just keeps moving and eventually fails on you. So one of the things that braces do is they work in conjunction with the top to just give the thing the structure it needs, while still letting most of the top be thin so it can vibrate and produce some sound. And then the other thing the braces do is they break up the resonance at the top so that you get a nice mix of resonant frequencies. If you Googled it, and you've probably seen the backside of an acoustic guitar top, you see what are called finger braces and all sorts of little braces that are running around. And they break up the top so that instead of resonating at one frequency, you put a brace down the middle, and now you have two frequencies. You've broken that up because frequencies are, of course, tied to dimensions. Right? You can look at a frequency and then calculate the wavelength, and you can see how that gets divided up in an acoustic guitar top.
Right. Okay.
So the patterns that you see are primarily based off of the Martin X bracing from, 100 years ago now, more than that actually. So even if you look at the inside of a Gibson guitar, to a casual observer, whether it's a Gibson or a Martin or whatever, they look roughly the same. There's not there are a few various patterns and a few things that people do that are different, but they're kind of similar. So the differences between different brands are in the nuances. For example, you could make your top 10% thicker and your braces 10% thinner. So now you're depending a little bit more on the top to withstand the string tension, and that has a certain sound. Or you can make your top paper thin and put beefier braces. Right? Either way, you got to come up with the right structural members there to hold the thing together. But you get a different sound by moving around which parts are stiff and which parts are loose.
It's such a interesting art form, like guitar building and just guitars in general, because like you said, largely we're relying on techniques that have been around forever, and both in the solid bodies, and in acoustic guitars. Like it seems like we are a very slow to evolve and type of industry and type of player. I couldn't stomach even looking at like headless guitars when they first came out. I was just like, oh man, that's terrible. And now I kind of want one. Like it's taken a long time for me to.
A long time for you to feel comfortable with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, because it's just like mentally so many players that I really respect have started making them cool to me somehow. And also having played some of them now, I'm like, oh, I get it. I get what this is all about. This all makes a lot more sense. And then having I had Jason Rogers from JMR Guitars on. Was it when in the winter? Yeah, it was December of 19, I think. The episode might have dropped later. It doesn't matter. But he explained multi-scale in a way that I had never heard anybody explain it before. I had no idea. Like, I was that guy that said, oh, it's for ergonomics. And he explained, he's like, well, it's not really for ergonomics. Like, that's not the driving force behind it. And it was a good episode. It was very informational.
I remember that episode.
Yeah.
And I kind of agree with what, I remember feeling like I agreed with what he was saying in that, it does something different. It's not, and that's a lot of what the guitar market is all about, is different things for different folks, right? So it does something different. It's not inherently better or worse, but to some people it's better, right? If that's kind of the sound you're looking for, but to someone else it's not better. So, not to say that multi-scale is good or bad, just that it's different and it's going to appeal to some people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's cool.
It's fun to play. I mean, and then again, there's different multi-scale approaches like he talked about. And so it was
yes, it could be extreme or slight.
Yeah. And I didn't really think about that either, but like playing his guitars, it was like, oh, this feels fine. But you look at it, you're like, oh no, what is that? I wouldn't know what to do with it. But
right, this is not the way a guitar is supposed to look. This looks like an art project gone bad. Wait. Yeah,
but it works. I mean, it once you play it, I think that's just what I would implore people to give it a try, because it's kind of it's not as scary as it looks. I still haven't tried.
It feels way more natural.
Yeah, it does. It does when it's done in certain ways. I've never tried I always forget the name of it. The squiggly frets. What are those called again?
Oh, I don't know what they're called, but I know what you mean.
I've never tried those. Those seem weird, but I wonder if they would be the same way. Like, is it like the perfect? I don't remember. Whatever they are. People know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's solving a problem that's only a problem to some people, right? Mm-hmm. That kind of gets into intonation. And, for example, some people are totally into the vintage Telly barrel bridge. Other people can't stand them because they don't intonate accurately enough. And famous recordings have been made on them. And yet, so, it's not good or bad. It's different. And each person's got a different thing that annoys them or that they love. And so for some people, that extra intonation accuracy is just like, oh, I've been waiting for this. And to someone else, they're like, what? I don't care.
Yeah, I it's never really appealed to me, but I don't know. I like I like vintage stuff too. That's one of my favorite guitars is a Les Paul Jr. and I know the intonation's not perfect, but it's okay. I'm gonna play more bad notes on it than like you won't even care about the intonation when I start playing.
Right. You can squeeze that chord a little too hard, and you'll screw things up way more than the intonation would have been off.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm famous for messing up chords. That's my favorite thing to do. It's what I do best. So you've gotten to do some pretty cool things, and you've had some rad folks play your guitars. Like who's all playing your stuff now?
Oh, let me think. Actually, I guess it's okay to name drop. I don't know. That's.
I just asked you to. It feels.
You asked me to. Yeah. I just. Michael Fuller, Full Tone Effects, just bought a baritone, and he's super excited and having a good time with it. So, so that's kind of a feel good sale, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And. Let's see. Up in the Seattle area, there's a jazz player named Tim Lurch, who actually just posted some baritone videos also. And some blues folks. Down here by me, there's someone named Kid Anderson, who's got a pretty famous recording studio and does a lot of work in the blues scene. And he's got a custom Mendocino that he's been touring the world with. And he did a really cool True Fire video series playing one of the Mendocinos as well. So who else? Nick Moss, who's a blues guy up in Chicago. Some of these folks are constantly on tour. I mean, not right now, of course, because of all the things happening. But a lot of these are really sort of hardworking kick butt bands that are on tour around the world all the time. 200 plus dates a year all over the place. Matt Hill from the Nicky Hill Band, Laura Chavez is playing in Grez. Paul Pagad up in Canada, Tommy Harkenrider, a friend of mine down in LA.
The beast, Paul's a beast. I forgot about him.
He's something else. He's got a small 15-inch arch top.
Interesting.
So fully hollow, but kind of really small and comfortable. Who else am I forgetting? Kenny Breska, who's a pretty well-known Broadway pit musician, plays on a lot of the Jersey Boys and whatever, and those sort of things. Anyway,
that's cool.
Folks, some folks.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna get around to doing some more video stuff here pretty soon, and I don't play anything like any of those people, so look out. And you
don't, and that's actually super cool. I'm excited to hear the things that come out of the shred shed.
I'm actually looking forward to doing some heavy stuff with it. That's what I've been doing. I've been doing heavy, it's actually been really fun for doing ambient stuff too. But I'm doing I love it with this couple different fuzzes. I'm trying to decide which one I want to use, but I was using it with my just old Russian Big Muff the other night, and I was just I lost. It was one of those times where you lose track of time. I haven't done that in a while, and it was all of a sudden we've been doing this for 2 hours. Probably better go to bed, since that's a good sign after midnight. So that might be it. I don't know. I haven't decided yet, but I want to do some heavy stuff with it because that's one thing I haven't seen, and I think that it actually really excels at it for me. I like baritones with lower output pickups. I think are just a magical combo, and I don't know why that's not been explored more, but I think it sounds good. So anyway,
the baritone market in general, I guess, is small, but that doesn't mean there's still not a lot of potential users out there. But it is a smaller market, and I think a lot of the manufacturers, or I should say, all the manufacturers, I think have a baritone guitar, but it tends to be the token baritone. Oh yeah, we got one of those. Lots of $5.99 baritones out there. Mm-hmm. Because someone gets the itch for a baritone and they don't want to drop big bucks on something handmade by some guy, but they can spend $600 on something they'll use once in a while. So there's just a lot of, let's just say, less expensive baritones out there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the market might be coming around a little bit. I think a lot of people, once they get to experience one, it's such a unique sound, having that extra scale length and and the availability now to get actually the right string sets for a baritone is a lot better than it has. In the past it was just you guys kind of were stuck with whatever off the shelf, and so now you can get custom sets and get it all dialed in. Not to plug my job, but String Joy is the place. But I started doing artist stuff for them here right before all of the COVID stuff. So in addition to all the other things, but I believed in Scott and the team down there for years. So I'm looking. I got this custom set for my my millimetric baritone. Yeah. And I might give it a try on this thing while I've got it, just for kicks, because I really like it on the millimetric. But this is a little longer scale length. My millimetric's only 27. This is 28 and a half. Is that right?
28 and a half, yeah. And with the tailpiece, it just barely works on standard baritone strings. It does, but you have slightly longer scale length, plus the fact that you need an extra 3/4 of an inch with the tailpiece versus a stop tail. Mm-hmm. It's right at the limit of what some baritone strings will fit on.
What made you decide on that scale length?
It was partly a practical decision. I was already making the Mendocino, right, which is the standard version, 25 and a half, a straight 25-inch scale length. And from a manufacturing standpoint, I had kind of figured out that if I made it 28.5-inch scale and attached to the neck at the 18th fret, that the pickups and the bridge would basically be in the same spot. So I could use the same body and the same top and basically just drop in a different neck in production.
Okay, gotcha.
So it wasn't so much like, 28.5-inch sounds so much better than 27. It was more a kind of a practical decision.
Gotcha.
And the fact that it was longer is better anyway, I think, right? I mean, if you're going to go baritone, eke out all of the crazy baritone vibe you can. And, so the longer scale length helps with that.
Yeah, the only reason we went with 27 on the millimetric is because that was my first baritone. And, well, it was my first 6-string baritone. And I have a Roni 7-string that is also 27. And at the time I got that, I was like, man, this thing feels like a mile long to me. And I feel like if I go much longer, it's going to feel awkward. So Florian's like, we can do 27. That's fine. And he's like,
what does he normally do?
I actually have the first baritone he ever made. So I don't know if he didn't have a normal at that point. But he was also like, I think 27 will aesthetically work better on this particular guitar. So we ended up going 27. That's the only real reason we did it. But after getting used to both of those for several years, the adapting to the 28.5 was no problem.
I find that I get used to the 28.5 super quick. And if I've spent a few days on the baritone, sometimes a regular guitar, it feels like a toy for the first 5 minutes. I'm just like, everything is so small and close together. It's just how cute.
Yeah, there was a big difference when I got done playing the Mendocino here recently, and then I strapped on my Les Paul Custom, and it was a lot shorter, but also about 5.5 pounds heavier. I'm just guesstimating. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, probably.
What are those normally coming in at for weight? Just out of curiosity.
The Mendocino is usually just a touch over 5 pounds. Every once in a while they'll be under 5, but I can't guarantee that, because every piece of wood's a little different. So let's say just a hair over 5, and then the baritones weigh a tiny bit more. So they're usually more like in the 5.5 pound range.
Yeah, it feels super light.
I was crazy light.
Yeah, it's like deceptive when you pick it up out of the case. You're like, oh, whoops! Like, did I just get super strong? Like, what's going on right now?
And that's a little bit of a throwback to the acoustic guitar thought process. Which is when you pick up an acoustic guitar that feels like a boat anchor, that's a bad sign that it's probably not going to be the best sounding acoustic guitar. And you pick up an acoustic guitar and it just floats. It weighs nothing. Those are, it's a pretty good sign that it's lightly built and it's going to be very lively. And so it's a little bit of the acoustic guitar stuff sneaking in.
So
and a little bit of a design goal. I wanted to make a light guitar, just as not that I sell tons of them because they're light, but it doesn't hurt.
Right. You never heard anyone say this guitar is too light, I can't play it. But
right.
True sometimes. So one thing we haven't really got into is your musical influences. Like, what made you get into all this in the first place?
Oh, well, I just always have been into music and sound. Like, even as a kid, right? Just super into stereos and all of that kind of thing. And always been into sound and in one form or another. And guitar, I've always been into guitar as well, but I'm really a bad guitar player. So I was fortunate early on, let's say when I was in my late teens, to realize that I wasn't going to make any money playing guitar, right? I mean, I might think guitar is awesome, but I'm not, I need to find some other way to make money in and around this music business. So, guitar has always been part of it, but I was lucky early on to figure out I needed to focus on something else. And, in terms of, when you say musical influences, do you mean like bands or do you mean?
Yeah. Artists or Anybody doesn't.
Well, that is so, geez, that has morphed so much over the years. But obviously it tends to be guitar player centric stuff. I grew up in the 80s, sort of in the hair metal days. Which meant, I listened to Van Halen and, what's his name? Steve Stevie's from Billy Idol and, the Police, all of that sort of stuff was sort of like my high school music scene. And, Night Ranger is from around here where I live. So that was they were kind of a cool local band, even though they were bigger than local, but still, they got extra kudos because they were from here.
Right.
And then, how do you Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, all of those sort of guys, how do you not just listen to that and go, oh, that's awesome. And then, to a lesser extent than some musicians might tell you, but it's a similar idea is, you listen to Steve Ray Vaughan and you think he's awesome, or George Thorogood or something like that. And then eventually you start realizing that they learned this stuff from someone before them. And, so that kind of leads you back into looking at old blues, like if you listen to Hound Dog Taylor, it's kind of like listening to George Thorogood. You're like, oh, well, that's obviously where he got his shtick from. And you do the same thing with Stevie Ray Vaughan, right? You can go back and see where so a lot of those old blues artists I think are really cool. But in modern artists, I'm okay with old country. I like that a lot. Like what I would refer to as like 70s phaser country. That really gets me going. Truck driving songs and sort of wailing with the phaser going, and that stuff is really awesome, I think.
Yes, well, I'm with you. That's what I grew up on. I love that stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if it's called phaser country outside of my brain, but that's what I think of it as.
Yeah, I just usually say like the 70s outlaw stuff. That's just such my jam. And I think my wife loves that too. Like she's like, if I only could, she says, and this isn't exactly as much phaser, but same kind of era. She's like, if I could only had to listen to one person for the rest of my life, it'd be Merle Haggard. I'm like, man, I can't really argue with that. I love Merle. Yeah,
that's not a horrible choice. That's all right. So all of those guys are, I kind of dig, and but I'm fine. I'm happy with modern music as well. I'm really not into music that isn't very guitar centric, which is probably a little close-minded of me, but I'm not really into rap music of any sort. Just not my thing. But dance music, electronica music doesn't get me going, but if there's a guitar in it, I'll listen to it.
That's kind of a weird thing with me. Was I don't tend to listen to a lot of electronic stuff either, but then sometimes like the sounds that I make with guitars and the couple bands that I do like, the guitars are so like distorted or processed in some other way that they're like borderline synthesizers anyway. I'm like, why?
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why do I like this but not that? That doesn't really make any sense. But I don't know. I guess it is what it is. Like, I think I shared a band called Show Me the Body in the group, and somebody was like, I thought you said you weren't really that into synths. I'm like, I'm not. This is guitars and banjos.
Right.
It's like, doesn't sound like it at all. It's all ran through a garbage disposal, maybe square waved out. It sounds. I love it though. Whatever. I guess we don't have to explain things, right?
Yeah. But it's like sort of synth MIDI guitar. I can see how it's super cool to some people, but just doesn't get me going, and that's fine. Nothing negative other than just personal taste, right?
Yeah. But it's all gravy. That's why there's different genres. That's why they exist. Well, we are getting down to the last few minutes of the podcast here, and right now would probably be a good time for you to say anything you wanted to say. If you got something you want to get off your chest, if you want to tell people where they can find you, whatever you want to do, this is your moment.
Oh, sure. Well, I'm easy to find. Grez, Grez, Grez Guitars, and come around, poke around, see what's there. It might be your thing, it might not. That's all right, but come check it out. And sort of feel weird trying to sell anything right now, considering so many of my potential customers are completely out of work with the COVID thing. But so go watch here. I guess right now the important thing to me would be to go watch the live streams of your favorite bands and send them some money. That's what I'm doing.
There you go. That's a good thing.
Since you can't see them live, you would have spent that money on a ticket price anyway. So spend the same money you would have spent, but just send it to them.
Yeah,
that way.
At least buy a T-shirt or something.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good advice. I like that. This music thing is what keeps us all going, and then our favorite musicians are the reasons. Well, like we just talked about, they're the reasons we're here right now talking. Is because we had musicians that impacted us. So go support them, folks. That's good. It's really good. All right. Getting into some of the classic questions. Here we go. What is your favorite Boss pedal?
Yeah, I thought about this, and I guess I have to man up and admit that I don't have one.
That's okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when I started playing guitar as a teenager, I didn't have any money and I couldn't afford a Boss pedal. I had DoD pedals and then used ones, right? Secondhand DoD pedals. And then, later on, I did have some dough and I was kind of buying some more boutique-y stuff. And I sort of just skipped the Boss thing. No, it's not a slight to Boss, but I just somehow don't own any and don't really know.
Well, you might want to go revisit some of the gems. They got some... I skipped Boss too for a little bit. When I first really started getting into gear, I didn't really have any pedals, but like the first things I was introduced to were full tone, Wampler stuff, Keeley stuff. Yeah. It's like the first kind of pedals I played. Yeah, I came to enjoy really cheap pedals later on, like the used DODs and things like that. Like
right.
I love that stuff. I still love it. Yeah, the switches are clunky, but some of them are really cool. And then I came back to Boss later after realizing that like so many pedals that I really liked were trying to do similar things to what Boss was the innovator of. Like they did it first. And so they're definitely worth going back and checking out because I did an episode a long time ago with Matt Knight from Guitar Nerds / Boss, and he is a big Boss nerd and now works for Boss. And he goes over a lot of really cool points that Boss has been like the innovator of, and things I didn't really realize that they've kind of started in a lot of ways started the pedal market themselves almost single-handedly. So definitely worth.
Yeah, and they're an icon. Even though I don't own any, I certainly would admit that they're an icon.
Right.
So many people have played with those pedals over the years. So many shows, so many records. Yeah, absolutely.
And who doesn't love a good TU2? All right. Here's the big one. I know you've probably prepared for this. What is your favorite kind of pizza?
Plain old New York style pepperoni.
Oh, man. My man. I feel that.
Yeah. Now, I'll eat anything, though. If it's pizza, I don't care if it's Little Caesars or the gourmet thing down the street. I'll eat pizza as long as there's no pineapple on it.
Oh, yes. Oh, right. My man. We're together.
I cannot comprehend the pineapple thing. It just doesn't compute.
Now, this is my question to my fellow pineapple-hating people. How do you feel about pineapple in general? Like,
I love pineapple.
Oh, okay.
See, I'll eat chunks of pineapple all day long. I love pineapple, but on my pizza, that just, I don't know. Can't
see, I don't like pineapple. So that's why I don't like pineapple on pizza. So I just don't like it. So, so I'm always trying to figure this out. So, but I know I'm actually the weird one. I know most people like pineapple.
Yeah.
Most people do.
Well, it's like sweet and sour Asian dishes, right? Sweet and sour pork or whatever. I don't really dig that either. I guess I don't like my savory food also be sweet. I'm into savory.
Yeah, I'm with you there most of the time. There's a few exceptions for like this sweet salty thing can work, but I'm with you. I like my meats to be savory 99% of the time.
Right. It's kind of like, I'm going to go off in the weeds here. It's like chutney, right? I mean, that's just a bunch of fruit. It's sweet, and people put it on pork all the time. But, I want the savory, not the sweet.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Although I will say, like, for pork, when I'm smoking pork, one of my go-to, like, I almost always inject it if like I'm doing a pork butt or whatever. I don't want it to get dried out. Like, I'd rather have it be overly juicy than overly dry. And one of my go-tos is a 50-50 combo of apple juice and apple cider vinegar. And that works really well with pork, which I would have.
Yeah.
But it actually works really, really well. It doesn't taste like apple juice. You know what I mean? You don't bite into it and go, ooh, this is apple. But it just worked better for pork for some reason. I use beer on beef.
But I think but I do think that's a little less sweet than like eating a chunk of pineapple on top of your pizza.
Yes, I would not do
that. It's not, you're not introducing that much sweetness.
No, definitely not. Right on, man. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for hanging out and sticking around. And with this one was actually very on topic this time, for the most part.
Wow,
so,
cool. Well, I appreciate you having me. It's excellent to talk to you in person.
Yeah, one of these days,
just listening to you on my phone while I'm working in the shop.
Yeah, this is you get to be on the other side of it now. That's a good time. Right. Well, keep doing what you're doing, man. I appreciate it. I think it's awesome.
Cool. Thank you very much.
All right, everybody. For Barry, this is Blake. And as always, folks, good luck and good tones. All right, we did it. There's another one in the can. I know I say that every week. Should I get another saying? I don't know. People like reoccurring things. I'm not sure. I'm just winging it over here. I'm just doing the best I can. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And if you didn't enjoy the episode, I don't know why you're still listening this far. But I do, again, thank you for it. I really do appreciate it. So yeah, if you want more of this conversation, we've got, oh man, I don't even know how many episodes we got on Patreon. We're getting close to 100. I think we're around 90 or something. But yeah, 90 additional episodes on Patreon, something like that, somewhere in that ballpark. I haven't counted them up. But that's a lot of extra content that you get access to for just $5 a month. And that ain't bad. It's not bad at all. And it quite literally helps keep the lights on around here because the patrons are currently financing the electric bill. And that is actually enormous. So thank you so much to all those that are supporting. That means so much to me. I guess the last thing would be, if you want to support the show via your gear buying habits rather than Patreon, which totally makes sense. I get it. I've definitely bought things from affiliates of podcasts that I enjoy. You can go to tonemob.com/sweetwater, and you'll see a page there of gear that I recommend. And everything on there I have had some level of experience with at the very least, if I don't own it myself. Most of it I own myself. But you don't have to buy that specific gear in order to support the show. Anything you get through that link, once you click through that link and you go to the rest of the website, anything you buy will come back and help scratch the back a little bit. And for that, I really, really thank you very much. Same thing goes on Reverb. If you're doing some shopping on Reverb for some vintage stuff or some used stuff, things that aren't available on Sweetwater, which totally makes sense. Reverb's got a lot of different people on there. Same thing, tonemob.com/reverb. And that will also be exactly the same. Anything you buy through that link will help scratch this show's back and keep the lights on and keep everything going. So thank you very much for everyone that's supported the show in any way, shape, or form, including just listening up to this point, because you are awesome. All right, you got other things to listen to. Let me get out of your ears. Talk to you next week. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, So why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.